My name is Claire Alden, and the day I watched my parents shove a homeless man out of their house was the same day a helicopter landed on our lawn for him, for Luke's father. The man they'd mocked, dismissed, called filth. I looked straight at my mother and placed her untouched pearl earrings in the homeless man's hand. He's worth more than you'll ever understand. That was the last dinner I ever ate in that house. Where are you watching from? Type your city or country in the comments, I'd love to know. And if you've ever had to stand alone against your own family, I think this story might speak to you. Let's start at the beginning. Let me take you back to the first time I realized my love meant nothing to the people who raised me. It happened in a place so normal, so cookie-cutter American, that no one would have guessed a heart could break there. I was 7 years old, standing in the cold hallway of the county animal shelter. The place smelled like metal and pine-scented disinfectant. My knees were scuffed. I remember that because I'd fallen chasing the kitten earlier that day, chubby, black-furred, with crooked little paws that couldn't run straight. He was trembling in my arms now, barely the size of a shoe, pushing his wet nose against my neck. I didn't even notice the scratches on my arms. I was too busy whispering to him, "It's okay. I'll feed you cheese for my lunch, I'll keep you warm, I promise you'll never be alone again." Behind me, my mother's heels clicked like a countdown. "You've had your fun, Claire. Put it in the cage," she said, the word "it" slicing the air. Her coat was white, spotless, not a single wrinkle. She hadn't even looked at the kit. "But he doesn't have anyone," I said, voice breaking. He can live in my closet." My father sighed, already halfway out the door. "It's not our problem, Claire, you're not old enough to make decisions like that." The shelter worker, kind-faced but tired, reached toward me. "It's okay, sweetie, we'll take good care of him." But I didn't want okay. I wanted him. I wanted to matter enough to be allowed to love something. My fingers clutched the kitten tighter. "Please," I whispered, tears dripping onto his fur, "just let me keep this one thing." "You don't get everything you want," my mother snapped. "Especially not strays, we have enough mouths to feed." The shelter worker gently took the kitten. His mule, soft, confused, followed me as I backed away. I didn't scream. I didn't beg again. Something inside me knew it wouldn't matter. The moment the cage clicked shut and the door to the shelter swung closed behind us, something inside me went still. Not silent, still, frozen like snow over hurt. I didn't speak on the ride home. My parents didn't notice. Later that night, my mother said, "Don't sulk, Claire, you'll forget about that flea-ridden thing in a week." My father just muttered, "We're not made of money." But I didn't forget. I never forgot the way the kitten had trusted me, or the way my mother's voice curled with disgust when she said, "It," or how my father, who used to lift me onto his shoulders, looked at me like I was foolish for trying to love something useless. That night, I drew a picture of the kitten and slid it under my pillow. I started sleeping with my arms around a stuffed bear that didn't feel warm anymore. And the next morning, when my mother asked me to set the table, I said nothing at all. I just did it, quietly, obediently. Something in me learned how to be very, very still. But I never forgot how quickly love could be caged and left behind. The floors always smelled like burnt syrup. By the end of a shift, my jeans stuck to my legs and the scent of bacon clung to my skin like shame. But I kept showing up. 4 afternoons a week, and every weekend from open to close, I scrubbed sticky counters and delivered greasy plates at Mel's Diner off Route 37. I was 15 and knew how to refill a coffee pot with one hand. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even legal, technically. I was too young for full shifts. But Mel turned a blind eye because I worked harder than anyone else he could hire for minimum wage. The other girls from school, Kayla, Morgan, and Delilah, used to giggle when they walked in, their nails glossy, their hair freshly blow-dried. They ordered iced caramel lattes and posted selfies in the booth while I wiped ketchup from the next table over. They'd wave at me sometimes. Not mean exactly, just distant, like we'd all lived on the same street once, but I had chosen to step outside the story. But I hadn't chosen anything. At home, my parents called my job a good lesson in character. My paychecks went into a joint account under their names. Every month, they promised to give me a little back for school supplies or bus fare. Somehow, the money was always spoken for. "The electric bill's high this month," my mother would say, lighting her scented candle anyway. "You don't need allowance," my dad laughed once, flipping through my deposit slip like it was a menu. "You've got your own hustle." Then came the line that never failed to make my stomach twist. "Besides, family helps family." I remember one night, standing at the sink with raw, red hands from washing dishes all day, while my father leaned against the doorway sipping the fancy cold brew I'd restocked at the diner. "Claire," he said, "you've got such a good work ethic. It's going to make you a real asset to someone someday." I looked down at my cracked knuckles and nodded. Someone, someday, never here, never now. Even the teachers at school didn't quite know what to make of me. I turned in every assignment, sat in the front row, never joined a club. One counselor once asked why I didn't try out for the fall play. I just smiled and said, "I have other commitments." I didn't tell her those commitments were named rent, groceries, and gas money that wasn't technically my responsibility, but somehow always ended up being mine. I remember walking home one October evening, counting coins in my pocket, trying to figure out if I had enough for sketch pencils. Art was the only class that felt like breathing, but the pencils cost $8 and the coins said $5.70. When I got home, my mother was polishing her nails with the same coral polish I'd wanted from the pharmacy 2 weeks ago. "That's pretty," I said, setting my backpack down. She didn't look up. "It was on sale," she said. Later that night, I found the receipt in the trash, $12. She'd used my debit card. I didn't say anything. I just closed my bedroom door and sketched with a ballpoint pen until the ink bled through the paper. Over time, I got good at silence, at swallowing small humiliations like vitamins, at expecting nothing but responsibility from people who gave themselves every luxury they could find. Mel once offered me an extra shift on my birthday. I said yes. My parents didn't remember until the day after. My mother gave me a re-gifted scarf. Still had the tag from her office's Secret Santa. My father tossed me a crumpled 20. "Get yourself something nice." I bought a used sketchpad at the thrift store, drew a bird with a broken wing on the first page, titled it Flight in Progress. Sometimes I wondered if they even noticed how tired I looked. Sometimes I wondered if they noticed me at all. But I kept working. I kept sketching. I kept moving. Because deep down, I believed there had to be more than this. That maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who wouldn't see me as a resource. Someone who'd ask, not take. Who'd listen, not laugh. Someone who wouldn't call me responsible like it was a leash. I didn't know who he was yet. But the first time I met Luke, he handed me a sandwich without asking if I was hungry. And I almost cried. But that part comes later. For now, I was just a tired girl with aching feet, calloused hands, and a sketchbook full of birds still learning to fly. The first thing I noticed about Luke wasn't his eyes or his smile. It was the way he didn't interrupt silence. At 19, silence had become my safest place. I'd learned not to fill it with explanations or apologies. The more I said, the more they twisted it. My parents, professors, even friends who never quite understood why I couldn't just take a loan or ask your folks for help. I'd wanted to attend a technical college in Chicago. Had the grades, had the portfolio, had even earned a partial scholarship. But when the acceptance letter came, my mother barely looked up from her tablet. "Out-of-state tuition," she scoffed. "Claire, be serious, we're not the Rockefellers." My father folded the letter in half without reading it. "You can learn just as much closer to home. Art is art." And just like that, my dream turned into another expense too big to justify, so I stayed. Enrolled at a small local arts college where the windows were drafty and the studio walls smelled like mildew. My dorm was half the size of my old bedroom, and I shared it with a girl who watched makeup tutorials at full volume while I tried to finish sketch critiques. I stopped fantasizing about big cities and open doors. Instead, I drew. In notebooks, on napkins, on the backs of cafe receipts. I carried my pencils like armor. It was in drawing fundamentals II that I first noticed Luke. He always sat 2 rows behind me, quiet, focused, with a habit of chewing the ends of his sleeves when he was lost in thought. His sketches were sharp and fluid, like he saw the world in angles and light instead of chaos and noise. He never spoke in class unless called on. When he did, he had this gentle rasp in his voice like he wasn't used to being heard. One afternoon after studio hours, I was sitting outside near the sculpture garden, curled over a sandwich I couldn't afford but had bought anyway because I hadn't eaten all day. My fingers were stained with charcoal, my sketchbook balanced on my knee. Luke appeared like a shadow at my side. "You forgot your lunch," he said, holding out a brown paper bag. I blinked up at him. "What?" "In class," he said simply. "You left it on the bench." "I didn't bring lunch." He paused, then gently set the bag down beside me. Then this one's mine, but you look hungrier. And just like that, he walked away. The next day, he sat beside me in the library, said nothing, just pulled out his sketchpad and started drawing. It became our rhythm. No declarations, no expectations, just quiet companionship. He never asked why I always wore the same boots, even in the rain. He didn't question why I turned down invitations to art shows or why I skipped student council meetings. Instead, he noticed when I needed an extra granola bar, remembered how I liked my coffee with cinnamon, no sugar. And once, during a particularly awful week when my parents had forgotten to transfer rent money like they promised, he wordlessly slipped a 20 between the pages of my sketchbook. I tried to give it back. He just shrugged. Pay it forward. One evening in late November, the sky already dark by 5, we sat on the damp grass near the campus fountain. He was sketching a warped lamppost. I was drawing a crow picking at a discarded glove. I don't know what made me say it. Maybe it was the cold or the way his presence made my spine unclench. But I whispered, "You're the first person who's never asked anything from me." He looked up, brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" "Everyone wants something," I said, my breath fogging the air. "Parents want my money. Teachers want my talent to boost their reputations. Even friends," I paused, then shook my head. "It always feels like I owe everyone everything." Luke tilted his head slightly. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," my voice cracked. "That's why I can breathe around you." He didn't say anything right away, just reached over and tugged the edge of my scarf higher over my chin. "Then breathe." We stayed there long after the cold numbed our fingers, sharing warmth from the silence. From that moment on, he wasn't just the boy in the back row. He was mine, in the quiet way someone becomes part of your life without forcing their way in. It happens on a rainy Thursday evening in my parents' dining room with the good plates. That alone should have warned me. I was 22, Luke was 23, and we had been together long enough that his quiet had become my home. For 3 years, he'd walked me through exams, panic attacks, and the strange ache of loving people who only knew how to take. So when he said, "Whenever you're ready, I'll meet them," I heard safety. I heard courage. I heard we. My mother insisted on roast chicken. My father insisted on not making it a big deal. "It's just dinner," my father said on the phone. "Don't expect a parade." Luke squeezed my hand as we walked up the familiar concrete steps. "If it's awful, we can leave early." "I've been saying that my whole life," I whispered. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and money anxiety. My mother, Evelyn, stood in the doorway, eyes already assessing Luke's jacket, his shoes, the careful neatness of him. "Well," she said, lips tight, "hello." My father, Richard, barely looked up from the table. "How many people are we feeding again?" "2, I said. "Like I told you," he sighed. "Chicken isn't cheap anymore." Luke offered a small smile. "I can help cover dinner if—" "No," my mother cut in sharply. "That wouldn't be appropriate." The word stung more than the refusal. At the table, the questions began, sharp and thin. "So Luke," my father said, cutting his chicken aggressively, "what do you actually do?" "I'm finishing my degree in graphic design," Luke replied calmly. "I also freelance." "Freelance," my mother repeated, "so not stable." "I manage," Luke said. My mother dabbed her mouth. "We just expected someone more polished." The room went quiet. My hands curled in my lap, my pulse thundered in my ears. "What does that mean?" I asked. She shrugged. "You've worked so hard, Claire, it's a shame to settle." Luke's fork paused midair. My father added, "Love doesn't pay bills." "That's rich," I snapped. "You've paid yours with my paycheck for years." My mother's eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic." Luke finally spoke, voice low but steady. "With respect, sir, ma'am, I love your daughter, I support her, I don't take from her." My father laughed. A short, ugly sound. "Support doesn't count if you can't provide." Something inside me cracked. I pushed my chair back so hard it scraped the floor. "You could have at least pretended to care," I said, my voice shaking. "Just once." My mother stood. "Sit down, Claire, you're embarrassing yourself." "No," I whispered, then louder, "you're embarrassing me." I grabbed my coat. Luke stood immediately. As we walked out, my father muttered, "This is why you never get ahead." The door slammed behind us. Outside, rain soaked my hair, my face, my clothes. I didn't feel it. In the car, Luke started the engine, then stopped. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't know they were like that." I laughed once, bitter and hollow. Neither did I, not out loud. He took my hand. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, I believed someone. We didn't drive right away. The rain streaked the windshield in soft vertical rivers, each drop catching the reflection of streetlights and memories I didn't want to revisit. My hands were still clenched in my lap, but my voice had already been used up at that table. I didn't have anything left to say. Luke reached over slowly and turned the car heater up a notch. Then he adjusted the vents so the warm air blew toward my hands. "I'm sorry they embarrassed you," he said after a long silence. His voice wasn't apologetic because he thought he'd done something wrong. It was soft because he knew they had. I turned my head to look at him, really look. His hair was damp from the rain, and there was a faint crease between his brows that only showed when he was genuinely worried. "They didn't embarrass me," I said quietly. He blinked. "They made me realize," I continued, "I never want to be like them." A moment passed. He didn't try to fill it with reassurances or silver linings. He just sat with me in it. I leaned over, resting my head on his shoulder. He smelled faintly of rain and laundry detergent, familiar and kind. His jacket was still cold from outside, but underneath it his arm was steady. "They don't know me," I said, my voice muffled against him. "They think I'm supposed to marry someone with a portfolio and a title and maybe a country club membership. They didn't even ask about your work or mine." "They don't see you," he murmured. "And they never have." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "They don't see what matters." He didn't offer a neat conclusion. "No, they'll come around. No, give them time." Just silence that held me like hands. The car was our little cave of truth now. The rain pattered gently on the roof and the defroster made the windows fog just enough to hide us from the rest of the world. No lectures, no judgment, just the quiet pulse of warmth and a growing understanding between us. After a while, I pulled back slightly and looked at him. "I'm sorry they made you feel small," I said. "You're not. You're the only thing that feels right in my life right now." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something soft and certain. "I didn't feel small," he said. "I felt like I was standing next to someone brave enough to leave the table." That caught me off guard. I let out a shaky laugh. "I didn't feel brave. I felt like I was 10 seconds from bursting into tears." "Brave people feel that way all the time," he said, and reached over to tuck a damp strand of hair behind my ear. "But you stood up anyway." I wanted to believe him. And in that moment I almost did. We sat there until the rain slowed. Eventually I took off my boots and curled my legs up onto the seat, letting the heater thaw the cold from my skin. Luke drove us back to campus with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the center console, where my fingers found his and stayed there. I didn't cry that night. Not out of pride. Not because I wasn't hurt. But because I had this strange, quiet clarity. That love, the real kind, wasn't loud or demanding or dressed up in expensive opinions. It showed up with a paper bag lunch. It sat beside you in silence. It didn't ask who you were trying to be, it just saw who you already were. By the time we pulled into the campus lot, I felt more grounded than I had in years. We didn't say much as we climbed the stairs to my apartment. But as I unlocked the door, Luke paused behind me. "You okay?" I nodded. Then I turned and pulled him inside, where the radiator hissed in the corner and my worn couch waited with familiar sagging arms. I peeled off my wet socks and he heated up some leftover soup from the fridge. We didn't talk about my parents again that night. Instead, we watched old cartoons on mute and sat under the same blanket, legs tangled. And in the safety of that small, imperfect room, I started to let go of the girl who once begged for a kitten. She'd never had a chance to feel wanted. But I was starting to learn what it meant to be chosen, gently, without condition. The cabin was Luke's idea. Just for the weekend, he'd said. No deadlines, no dishes, no Ohio suburbia looming outside the window. Just a tiny place in the woods, a borrowed family retreat 2 hours out, surrounded by trees and silence and space to breathe. He drove, I navigated, or pretended to. Really, I was just holding the map so I could feel useful. Luke didn't need directions. He'd been coming here since he was a kid. I remember thinking that was rare. That kind of consistency, having a place to return to. My coffee sat between my knees, warm against the chilly morning. The radio was tuned low, murmuring news and top 40 songs as we passed fields edged with frost. My boots were off. Luke was humming faintly. The world felt distant, manageable. Then the radio voice sharpened, sliding through the quiet like a stone skipping across glass. Makes rare public appearance at the new Voss Institute Expansion Gala, marking his first press moment since the AI acquisition. Billionaire tech mogul Eric McAllister. My fingers froze around the coffee cup. I glanced sideways. Luke's mouth twitched faintly as he adjusted the rearview mirror. I blinked. Wait, did they just say McAllister? MMHMM. I waited. He didn't elaborate. Luke. He finally turned to me for a second, eyes calm, steady. That's my dad. Silence. I felt the coffee cup slip sideways in my hands. I caught it, barely setting it down with exaggerated care. I'm sorry, what? He shifted gears, eyes still on the road. Eric McAllister, founder of Arc Sin, he's my father. I blinked again, like maybe if I did it hard enough, the sentence would make more sense. That Eric McAllister, the billionaire. The one with the island in British Columbia and a university wing named after him. Luke nodded, calm as ever. Yeah, that one. I stared at him. You never told me. He shrugged slightly, but his grip on the wheel tightened, just barely. Didn't want it to be the first thing you knew. You've known me for 3 years, Luke. I know. He finally looked at me again, this time really looked, his face open in that way that made me feel seen all the way through. I was waiting to see if you'd still want me if I wasn't one. I blinked again, slowly this time. The pieces slid into place, his quiet habits, the understated quality of his clothes, the fact that he never once asked to split the bill when he knew I couldn't, how he'd never once made me feel like I owed him anything. My throat tightened. Luke, I don't care about that. You know I don't care about that, right? He nodded once. I do now. But you thought I might, he exhaled. Not you exactly. I think I just didn't want to become the money. To you, to anyone. People treat you differently once they know. They either want something or they resent you for not giving it. His voice didn't sound bitter, just tired, like someone who'd learned to hide the parts of himself that made people want things. I reached over and put my hand on his. You're not your dad's bank account, Luke. Not to me. You're the guy who brings me lunch and knows I like cinnamon in my coffee. You're the guy who makes space for silence. He smiled a little, finally. You're the girl who said I never want to be like them, then walked out without a coat. I laughed, cheeks flushing. Yeah, I wasn't exactly thinking straight that night. He squeezed my fingers. You were thinking straight, you just weren't thinking safe. We didn't speak for a while after that. Just drove, windows slightly fogged, the pine trees growing taller the further we went. Eventually, I leaned back in my seat, the shock settling into a warm kind of curiosity. There were questions I could ask, about inheritance, about legacy, about the kind of world he came from, but I didn't. Because I knew, instinctively, he'd tell me everything I needed to know when I was ready to hear it. And more importantly, he'd still look at me the same whether I did or didn't. As the car curved around the final bend toward the cabin, I glanced at him again, really studying him. Not a tech heir, not a secret prince, just Luke. And if anything had changed, it was only that now I finally understood how much he'd chosen to meet me where I was. No expectations. No tests, just love disguised as quiet patience. And maybe, for the first time, I wasn't afraid to accept it. I wasn't planning to tell them, not right away. But the words burned in my mouth the entire ride over, and by the time I stepped through the front door of my parents' house, I was too tired to pretend anymore. It was Sunday afternoon. The smell of overdone roast lingered in the air, and my father's game show echoed faintly from the living room. The house hadn't changed. Still the same dated wallpaper, the same off-white carpet they refused to replace because it's still got life in it. I walked into the kitchen where my mother was polishing silverware she hadn't used since my graduation brunch. She glanced up at me and said, "You left early the other night. We didn't even finish dessert." I folded my arms. "You insulted my partner at the dinner table." She paused, eyes narrowing slightly, then resumed polishing. "We were just surprised, that's all. You could have warned us he came from a modest background." My father's voice called from the living room. "It's not about background, Claire, but you could have picked someone with a real career." I should have laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped forward and dropped the news like a match. Luke's father is Eric McAllister. Silence. My mother froze mid-polish. My father sat up straight so fast the recliner creaked. "You're joking," he said. "I'm not," I replied. "Luke is his son." My mother turned slowly to face me, eyes wide. "Eric McAllister, the Arc Sin guy," I nodded once. She reached up to her neck, instinctively touching the string of pearls she wore only for family portraits and funerals. The clasp was crooked. My father let out a long breath and stood. "Well, that's a surprise." "A good surprise," my mother said quickly. "Of course, a connection like that, Claire, you should have told us sooner." I said nothing. We were only concerned because, well, my father coughed, he didn't exactly look like a McAllister. He wasn't supposed to, I said. He wanted to be judged on who he is, not who his father is. My mother gave a high, nervous laugh. Well, we certainly didn't judge him. I mean, maybe we were a bit stiff, but it's understandable, first impressions. I raised an eyebrow. You called him unpolished. I never said that, she replied, too quickly. You did, I said. You said it with your mouth and your face and your tone. She looked away. My father cleared his throat again. Look, Claire, maybe we didn't give him a fair chance. But now that we know, well, of course we'd love to meet his family. That's the proper thing to do, isn't it? A formal dinner, perhaps. I stared at him. Really stared. It wasn't regret in his voice. It was recalibration. You could see it happening in real time, his mind rearranging their earlier contempt into something that sounded more like cautious approval. As if knowing Luke's bloodline had suddenly reclassified him from burden to asset, my mother chimed in. We could host. Or better yet, we'd be happy to visit their estate if that's the custom. We want to make things right. Do you? I asked softly. She smiled. Of course, darling, we just want to support you. I stepped forward, planting both hands on the edge of the counter. You want to meet their money, I said, not their family. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. My father's eyes flicked to hers, waiting for a cue. I kept going. When you thought he was poor, he wasn't good enough. You didn't care that he was kind, or decent, or respectful. You cared that he didn't wear a watch that cost more than our rent. Claire, my mother began. No, I said. You don't get to perform interest now, not because of his last name, not because you see dollar signs when you hear it. My father's expression shifted, defensive now. It's not like that, we just didn't know the whole picture. And now you do, but nothing's changed except your angle. I stepped back. They're not going to meet you. The words settled like dust in a still room. My mother blinked. What do you mean? I mean you don't get access to them, not now, not after how you treated him. My father frowned. Claire, don't be dramatic. I'm not. I'm protecting the one person who's ever protected me. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. I won't let you use him, I said, and I won't let you rewrite what happened. I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. You should have cared when you thought he had nothing, I said without turning around. Because now that you know the truth, it's too late. It was a quiet kind of panic. The kind that crept in slowly, disguised as nausea, dizziness, and an intuition I didn't know how to name until it refused to be ignored. I bought the test alone. I didn't tell Luke, not yet. I needed to see it in black and white first. 2 lines. No hesitation. I didn't cry, not right away. I just sat on the bathroom floor, knees tucked to my chest, staring at the tiny stick that now divided my life in 2 before and after. It had been a month since the showdown at my parents' house. A month since I'd slammed the door on their performative affection and refused to let them sniff around Luke's last name like hungry dogs at a banquet. In that time, things between Luke and me had only grown steadier, stronger. But this was different. This was a new life, a new world. And I had no idea how to hold it. I waited 3 days before I told him. We were at the cabin again, just for a night this time. The air was sharp with early spring, stars scattered like glass dust across the sky. We'd lit a fire outside and sat wrapped in an old quilt, mugs of hot tea warming our hands. I'd rehearsed it in my head 100 ways. But when the moment came, I just said it. I'm pregnant. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away, or freeze, or crack a joke to buy time. He blinked once, then looked at me fully, eyes steady, sure. Okay, he nodded. Okay, we'll figure it out. A pause, then softly, we'll do a wedding, small, just us and the right people. I'll handle the introductions. I exhaled, some part of me collapsing in relief and another tightening with fresh fear. My fingers curled tighter around the ceramic mug. Luke, he tilted his head. What is it? I looked at him, my voice barely audible. They'll ruin it. He knew exactly who I meant. My parents, the same people who mocked his quiet, questioned his worth, and only changed their tune when they heard his father's name. Luke didn't argue, didn't say they won't. He just reached for my hand. Only if you let them. I stared into the flames for a long time. He made it sound so simple, like I had control over it, like I had the power to draw that boundary and hold it firm. But that wasn't how I'd been raised. I had been trained to bend, to over-explain, to absorb guilt like a sponge and wring myself out just enough to be tolerable again. What if they showed up with fake apologies and crocodile tears? What if they said all the right things to Luke's parents, wrapped in careful words and practiced smiles? What if they made me doubt myself all over again? He must have seen the questions in my eyes because he gave my hand a small squeeze. You don't owe them anything, he said. Not a seat at the table. Not a second chance. Not access to this. Touched my belly gently, just above the blanket. A tremor ran through me. I hadn't cried when I saw the test, or even when I said the words aloud for the first time. But now, sitting beside the man who met my fear with calm, my silence with certainty, the tears finally came. He pulled me closer, let me cry into his shoulder. And when the storm passed, I whispered the truth I hadn't even said to myself yet. I don't know how to be a mother when I still feel like a daughter trying to earn love. Luke didn't rush to fill the silence. Eventually, he murmured, then we'll build something better for them, for us. We sat like that until the fire burned low. Later, as I lay in bed with his arm around me and his breath steady in sleep, I pressed my hand to my stomach and made a quiet vow. You will never beg to be loved. You will never have to prove your worth. And as for my parents, they would learn that this was one door they didn't get to knock on anymore. I hadn't planned on stopping. The road from the chapel to my parents' house cut through old neighborhoods and rusting fences, past convenience stores with flickering signs and houses where curtains stayed drawn even in daylight. It was my wedding day, and I should have been brushing blush over my cheeks or pinning gardenias in my hair. Instead, I was alone behind the wheel, a letter in my glove compartment and something heavier in my chest. The ceremony was in 4 hours. Luke was with his parents and the officiant at the cliffside garden we'd chosen, a place with wildflowers instead of chandeliers, laughter instead of seating charts. I wasn't wearing my dress yet. Just jeans, a pale sweater, and the shoes I'd owned since college. Something in me needed to be ordinary for this part, to remind myself who I was before vows, before a new name, before stepping into a family that chose me without conditions. My parents hadn't been invited. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood the difference between silence and peace, and I was done mistaking one for the other. I didn't expect them to change, but I wanted to say it out loud, to leave a note, a boundary, a goodbye they couldn't spin into their own version of events. And then I saw him, just off the shoulder, near the gas station that always had the broken air machine. He was thin, wrapped in layers of fabric that had long since lost their original color. His hands trembled as he held a sign made from a torn cereal box. Need help. Not a druggie, just tired. Cars passed without slowing. The wind tossed the corners of his cardboard plea, flipping it sideways. And suddenly I was 7 years old again. A trembling kitten in my arms, a cold shelter cage, the metallic click of abandonment. My mother's voice echoing, "It's too expensive to feed strays." That same heaviness clutched my ribs now. The ache of watching something small and human be deemed disposable. I slowed. My head said don't. My gut said this isn't safe, but something deeper whispered see him. I rolled down the window and called out, "Sir." He turned, weathered face, eyes wary. He looked startled just to be spoken to. I opened the passenger door. "Get in, I'll help you." For a moment, we both hesitated. Him, likely wondering if this was a trick. Me, wondering if I was crazy, but his legs shuffled forward. He moved with the slowness of someone unused to being welcomed. He climbed in, clutching his bag to his chest like a shield. He didn't speak. Neither did I. We just sat in the quiet hum of the engine, the heater clicking softly, the smell of old fabric and damp air surrounding us. And strangely, I wasn't afraid. There was a conviction pulsing just beneath my skin, like this was something I'd been circling toward for years without knowing. "I'm Claire," I said after a few minutes. He nodded slowly. "David," I nodded back. "Nice to meet you, David." He stared straight ahead, then murmured, "You sure you want to take someone like me to a place like that?" I followed his gaze. We were pulling into my parents' neighborhood now, brick homes with tight lawns and clean porches that never welcomed anyone unexpected. "I'm not taking you there for them," I said. "I'm taking you there for me." He didn't ask more, just leaned his head back, eyes closing briefly. And as I turned onto the final street, past the same mailbox I used to check for report cards, the same cracked driveway where I'd once learned to ride a bike, I felt something unexpected. Not fear, power. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the years. Maybe it was perspective. Or maybe it was the man quietly stepping behind me, his coat frayed at the edges, his presence a sharp contrast against the manicured hedges and matching porch lanterns. I rang the doorbell. Not because I had to, but because I wanted it to feel formal. Like a statement, "This is not a visit, This is a verdict. Footsteps approached, fast and clipped. The door swung open and there she was, my mother, in pearls and lipstick too bright for a Sunday. Her eyes skipped past me, landing immediately on the man at my side. Her expression changed in half a second, from puzzled to horrified. "What is this?" she snapped. I stepped inside. "This is David. He'll be joining us for lunch." "Absolutely not," she said sharply. "Claire, have you lost your mind?" My father appeared in the hallway, adjusting the cufflinks he never wore unless money might be watching. "Is this a joke?" "No," I said calmly. "It's a choice." David stood just inside the doorway, hands still folded over his bag, eyes lowered like he was preparing to be thrown out. "I made enough soup for 3, I said. 4's easy." My mother blocked the hallway like a gate. "Claire, Luke's parents are coming any minute. You think this man is going to be part of that picture?" "He's already part of it." Her voice rose. "You're going to ruin everything." "Everything," I echoed. "You mean the performance, the chance to impress people you didn't care about until you Googled their last name?" David coughed softly behind me. I turned to him. "There's a chair in the kitchen. Go ahead and sit. I'll bring you a bowl." My mother gasped. "You are not feeding him in this house." I stared at her. "Do you hear yourself?" My father tried to smooth it over with a chuckle. "Claire, come on, be reasonable. What if Luke's father shows up early and sees?" "Sees what?" I said, voice cutting sharper now. "A man who needed kindness and got it. A daughter who grew up and learned how to offer what she never got." She recoiled like I'd slapped her. David shuffled past, slow and silent. I heard the soft scrape of a chair leg across the tile as he sat. I followed him, retrieved the soup pot, and ladled it into a chipped bowl. I added crackers from the pantry, water, a cloth napkin. Not because I was pretending this house was generous, but because I was. As I placed the bowl in front of him, a sound broke the air, a low, growing rumble. It wasn't thunder. My father frowned, stepping toward the window. "What on earth is that?" The rumble deepened, vibrating through the floorboards now. My mother clutched the edge of the counter. "Claire, what is that sound?" I smiled, because I already knew. The windows shivered. Glassware trembled on the shelves. Then, through the kitchen window, a shadow passed, long, sleek, unmistakable. Whoop 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 whoop. A private helicopter began its descent, blades slicing the air, stirring the grass below into a frantic whirl. My father backed toward the door. "Is that—" My mother's mouth dropped open. "No, it can't be." But it was. I didn't answer them. I didn't need to, because the message was already landing on the lawn. I glanced at David, who was eating slowly, spoon trembling just slightly, and I waited, because sometimes justice doesn't come with shouting. Sometimes it arrives in a tailored wind, carried by wings no one thought to respect. The rotor blades spun like a heartbeat in the sky, pulsing louder with each second. From the window, my mother pressed her manicured fingers against the glass. Her pearls looked tighter somehow, like they sensed the tension too. My father had gone eerily quiet, his hand frozen on the back of the dining chair as if letting go might unravel him. I stayed by the kitchen sink, watching David finish his soup in silence. Then the front door opened. The wind arrived first, cool and commanding, rushing into the house like an invisible wave. Then came the man in uniform, the pilot, tall, straight-backed. Helmet tucked under one arm. He didn't glance at me or my parents. His eyes landed directly on David. He offered a crisp salute. "Sir," he said, clear and unwavering, "your helicopter is ready." Silence cracked across the room like thunder after lightning. David, still wearing the same worn coat, same old shoes, set down his spoon. He stood slowly, pushing the chair back with gentle care like he didn't want to scuff the floor. My mother stepped forward. I don't understand. What is this?" David looked at her for the first time. His voice was calm, measured, sharp enough to slice through the years of judgment that clung to the air. "I'm Eric McAllister." My father stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a vase. Eric shrugged off the coat. Underneath, his posture shifted. No more slouch, no more disguise. There was elegance in the stillness, power in the restraint. "My son didn't tell you who I was," he continued, "because he wanted to know what mattered to you: character, integrity, kindness." He turned to me then, and for the first time smiled. Not a grand gesture, just the quiet pride of someone who sees you clearly. "Claire," he said, "you passed." He looked back at my parents. "They didn't." My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came. My father stammered. We didn't know." Eric raised a hand, silencing him. "You knew everything you needed to. There was a man at your door, and you told your daughter to get rid of him." I stepped forward now, voice soft but steady. You didn't even help a man at your door. My mother's face crumpled like paper. Eric turned toward the entryway. The pilot stepped aside. I moved to follow but paused at the threshold. I glanced back once more. And in that moment I wasn't 7 years old anymore, begging to keep a kitten. I wasn't 15, handing over wages I'd earned. I wasn't 19, denied a dream because it cost too much. I was a woman. And I was done asking to be seen. The hum of the helicopter was gentler now, softened by altitude and the quiet inside the cabin. Below us, the town shrank into patches of green and gold, rooftops like forgotten puzzle pieces, roads like threads snaking through memory. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The house I left behind had already disappeared in more ways than one. Luke sat beside me, his fingers loosely entwined with mine, thumb brushing slow, steady circles against my skin. Across from us sat a woman in her 50s, elegant, composed, radiating the kind of warmth that didn't need to announce itself. Her name was Mary's, Luke's mother. She had greeted me at the launch pad without fanfare, just a soft hug and a smile that reached her eyes. The kind that made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I hadn't imagined families like this after all. Now, high above the clouds, I stared out the window and let my voice find its way. I was scared of your world, I said softly, not looking at Luke. He turned toward me. Why? Because I thought I'd always be on the outside of it. That I'd never know what it's like to be enough. Mary's leaned forward gently, her tone quiet but sure. And yet, Claire, you're the only one who truly belongs in it. I looked up. There was no pity in her eyes, no patronizing softness. Just calm certainty like she'd already watched me pass every unspoken test without knowing I was being tested. I smiled, small and unsure. I didn't grow up with this, I said. Private helicopters, estates, people who mean what they say. Mary's eyes crinkled at the corners. You didn't grow up with this, Claire, but you grew into it. That's more impressive. Luke nudged my knee gently. And you've had more grace than most people born into it. The air between us was quiet, rich with something deeper than relief. It was belonging, not bought, not faked, not earned through performance but given freely. Outside the window, a large white estate emerged, nestled against a cliff, overlooking the sea. Clean lines. Bright gardens. A view that stretched forever, but I didn't care about the size of it. I cared that Luke squeezed my hand tighter as we approached. I cared that Mary's said, "Welcome home," before the wheels even touched down. And I cared that, for the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for disappointment. I wasn't tensing for the moment love turned conditional. As we descended, the past felt lighter, quieter, like something that no longer needed to follow me into every room. I turned to Luke. You still sure about all this? He grinned. Claire Alden, I was sure the second you asked if I wanted half your sandwich in the library. I laughed, cheeks flushing. It was a good sandwich. It was a life-changing sandwich. The helicopter settled, the door opened. We stepped out into sunlight and ocean wind and something new. Not safety, not perfection, but something better. Home. The garden was alive with laughter, the scent of lemon blossoms drifting lazily through the late afternoon air. Strings of lights dangled overhead like glowing pearls, swaying gently with the breeze. Somewhere near the fountain, Luke was showing guests how to make paper airplanes for the kids. And in my lap, nestled against my sketchbook with fingers smudged in crayon, sat my daughter, bright-eyed and barefoot. Her name was Iris. 2 years old, endlessly curious, with Luke's quiet focus and somehow, my exact scowl when she didn't get her way. She was humming something tuneless while I traced the outline of her profile onto the page. She giggled, wiggling under my pencil. That's my nose, she said proudly. Yes, it is, I smiled. A very powerful nose. Iris beamed. Across the lawn, waitstaff passed by with trays of citrus tarts and chilled teas. The guests, artists, friends, a few of Luke's colleagues, moved freely, without performance or pretension. And near the rose trellis, standing stiffly with untouched drinks in hand, were my parents. They hadn't been invited, not exactly. Luke had left it up to me, and I'd surprised even myself by sending a polite note. They had RSVP'd with a single sentence. We'd like to come if that's still allowed. They arrived quietly. No pearls this time, no lectures. They hadn't tried to dominate the conversations or charm the powerful. Instead, they watched. They watched me laugh with Luke's mother. They watched Iris paint rocks with the gardener's son. They watched the life I'd built without their approval and without their rules. Eventually, they approached me. My mother cleared her throat first. You've done well, she said softly. Iris looked up. Who's that? I hesitated. These are people I used to know. There was a pause. Then my father, his voice low, added, We were wrong, Claire, about a lot. I looked at him for a long time. I know, I said. He nodded, as if that was more forgiveness than he expected. My mother looked like she wanted to say more, but for once she didn't push. They left after 20 minutes, didn't linger, didn't ask for photos. And when they were gone, I didn't feel hollow. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt whole. Iris pulled at my sleeve. Draw me again, Mama. I turned a fresh page, smiled, of course, because dignity didn't come from their approval. It came from every boundary I'd held, every silence I'd broken, every time I stood for love over legacy. And the girl who once begged to keep astray, she now had a family who kept her. And that was the end of my story. When Luke's father, Eric, disguised himself as a homeless man to see how my family would treat a stranger, he risked humiliation just to protect his son's heart. That moment changed everything. But did he go too far, or was it the only way to show what mattered? Tell me in the comments, do you think he did the right thing? If this story moved you even a little, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it.